Hi, I'm John C. Havens. I am the Global Regenerative Sustainability Practice Lead at the IEEE Standards Association. I also am the Executive Director of the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. This idea of moving slowly versus moving fast, there's so many levels to that answer that I've been gifted over the past 10 or 15 years with the AI experts I've worked with. One thing is that when you talk globally to people, you instantly or very quickly, at least for me as a Westerner, recognize that most ethics, at least, and I'm from Needham, Mass, so I'm sitting not far from where I was raised here in Boston. You recognize that this idea of kind of like individualism and rationality, and a lot of times in terms of like making money and getting a career. I'm being very general to make a point, and these are not bad things, right? The term ethics is sort of oftentimes instantly synonymous with morality, whereas applied ethics is about design. But when you say, what am I coming, what's my perspective, and the logic is, well, what's the metric of success for my life? In general, as a 54-year-old male, I was raised thinking, well, once you do X, once you make a certain amount of money, once you have a certain amount of notoriety in your career, then you have worth. Now, that doesn't mean that people think you're, useless or shouldn't be on the planet, but there's sort of a sense of like, if you go to Maslow's hierarchy and all that like stuff, you have worth once you get to a certain place. Now, having goals, achieving those things, being productive, great. When they're the primary thing, or when they're the only thing, that myopia shapes every bit of technology and policy that we create. It's invisible, so a lot of times in these conversations I try to quote, like Eastern thinkers or people from the global South, and with respect, because I'm not from those places, I'm not someone from Brazil. Especially with sustainability, remind people that if you want to have a holistic systems engineering or systems thinking mindset towards any technology we create, it's not just myopic, it causes harm. If through ignorance, not intention, but ignorance doesn't mean you don't cause harm. And ignorance is not an excuse for irresponsibility. So the point being, when you build something, say a car in North America, and you're like, hey, I've done my job with ESG transmission stuff. I know that my emissions are not going to harm this nearby area. But then you don't necessarily know that the car parts that you're making, if they go into the ground, are going to cause a form of pollution that may affect a global supply and value chain. So walking all that back to say the reason slow, as especially an English word, if you go like to indigenous traditions, there's so many beautiful phrases and stuff I'm even trying to sort of grok, in the sense of like, what does slow even mean? And when you're in nature, at least for me, and I think a lot of people are this way, time becomes different. And you're not like, I had a productive time just now communing with my spirit in nature. You're like, I got to a place where I could take a breath and sort of say what's important for me, my kids, other people's kids, other people's, people around the world. And you sort of recognize the metric of success, and this is me, and thanks for letting me answer with the long response. But if one is baked in the sense that like productivity and speed of growth and efficiency are always the most important thing, then in general right now in 2023 we're going to fall into patterns of things like, and these are just words in one sense, capitalism, competition, but things that literally have led us to the point, there's a term called the Anthropocene. It's a term that's used to define this era after the industrial era, and human-based stuff has affected the climate. And without getting all like, this is a climate denier and this is the science and all that type of stuff, is to take a step back and just be like, hold on. Pretty much universally, when I travel around the world, the slowness, the thing I like about that word, and I'll wrap up this answer, thanks for listening, is like right now I'm doing an interview with you. I was an EVP at a top 10 PR firm. I know that people are going to watch us and be like, that guy's sound bites are kind of long. But I'm like, you asked a question about the nature of time. I need more than like a little soundbite. Sure. And then more importantly, like, you seem cool, the camera person seems cool, I've really enjoyed people here. I'm trying to establish living in the moment to the point where I can connect with you. May not remember your name, but I'll be like, hey, you're the guy that interviewed me at Northeastern, how's it going? And that human connection, I never have this moment in time again. What is productivity? I'll get this thing done, and I'll go out this, and I'll do this, I'll do this. Like, I want to live in these moments. And part of that means recognizing the place and the planet and the land where I am and all that type of stuff. So time is a really interesting thing to me, especially if you get into physics and understanding how time changes and stuff. But just in closing, there's such a freedom, at least there was for me, when I recognized, what if my life, as much as I need to get things done and have goals, wasn't based on the ultimate metric of productivity first? What would my life look like? How would I love the people in my surroundings better? Oh, that's a great question. I mentioned on the panel Pope Francis. I cannot stress strongly enough, and this is not a religious entreaty, even though I went to college thinking I was going to be a minister in the Methodist Christian tradition. This is go to someone who's a world leader, you may have heard of Pope Francis, and go to a place of influence that's not just Silicon Valley or kind of a technocracy mindset. And when I say technocracy, I love technology. It's why I work at IEEE. It's the world's largest technological association. But in terms of how technology is used, or the Greek word techne, T-E-C-H-N-E, there's the philosophy around technology, because when I put a piece of technology into your hands, into the woman's hands over here, an indigenous person's hands, etc., each of those people, they will define the technology as they hold it in their hands and as it encompasses them in the context of their lives. So for me as a designer to be like, here's how this technology is going to affect you, right? It's not that it's arrogant, because you want to design it to do something. And the first time a piece of technology enters into my life, one thing I love is the wonder, the awe and the wonder. And engineers are some of the most exciting, like giddy, playful people. An 80-year-old person will be like, oh, I just came up with this idea. And I love that. But to your answer, I wrote a book. My last book was called Artificial Intelligence, Embracing Humanity to Maximize Machines. In 2014, I wrote a book called Hacking Happiness, Why Our Personal Data Counts and How Tracking It Can Change the World. On our panel and at this conference, I mentioned this yesterday, we haven't talked as much about people having access to their data. There's this myth that's an obfuscation. It's an agenda that we can't have access to our data, or that our data doesn't mean anything. It is factually untrue. And that's from working for 15 years with some of the world's leading experts around the world. And in one sense, it's not all that exciting. You know, like if you have access to your data and your doctor says, and this is like if you go to Tallinn, Estonia, they do some of the leading work in data in this way. And you have a medical exam the next day, and the doctor calls, or the nurse or whoever, the assistant, hey, you have an examination tomorrow, and we're going to get your eyes checked. And you're like, I'm getting a physical. My eyes are fine, right? You know what's happened there? Two people providing value to each other, correction. You're still going to pay the doctor. You're going to pay your insurers. Data brokers, the sort of middle veil between our data and these tools that use them, we don't talk about them enough. And rather than focus on the negative and obfuscation and all that stuff, as humans in modernity, we need to have tools that essentially are the equivalent of a personal data algorithmic agent. That's what it is. You can go online and do 10 pull-down menus, and you could say, well, this is how I want my data shared, and this is how I want to access my data. That tool would then literally be sort of an agent for your data, a legal agent, so that when an algorithm comes up against your data, there's a way to respond and have a form of parity. I bring that up because the foundation of modernity in terms of these tools are built on advertising. You know, Peter Norvig, who's brilliant from Google, spoke about this. But Google's an advertising company. They're not a search company. If you look at what they actually say on their business page, what they make money from, that doesn't mean they're evil by any means. But it's interesting when you look at the do no evil clause. It's changed now, but when I wrote my book in 2016, the do no evil is not this moral sense of like, Terminator bots. It's how worth is measured, and they talk about we will never fall prey to excessive growth paradigms in the GDP. So I bring this back because the temptation, I think, as humans is if I do all these things fast enough or efficient enough, I'm okay. But 1 in 2 people, according to U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, right now, today, 1 in 2 people suffer from isolation and loneliness, which physiologically has the same deleterious effects as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's taking 14 to 17 months off of people's lives. So at the end of the day, one thing I'm trying to say with my messaging is first of all, I love the technology. I work at an organization where I get to be around the people driving things like what's going to happen in the metaverse when we use Neuralink, you know? But then I'm also keenly aware of this sort of voice of the world that Francis talks about beautifully, that Mother Nature, our sister, we are made up of water. We are nature. And this opportunity to say, well, what if we have no time to waste about saving the resources like water and the minerals coming out of the earth and all that stuff. If you go to the IPCC, the 6th report from the scientists, and this is, again, outside of climate denial, I point to like plastic pollution, you know, like I don't know how you can avoid like Paris-sized things of plastic floating. And you and I, all 4 of us in this room, if I measured our blood, the science says we would have plastic particulates in our blood. So denying that the earth is changing, I think, is something where as humans, it's like, it is easier to sort of avoid than it is to sort of ask tough questions. But those questions, either in slowness or in introspection, to your point, Zen, I have a lot of respect for Buddhist thought, provide the only answers that lead to self-awareness, sort of self-healing, and the care. Really, shockingly, to cure isolation and loneliness, one of the best things to do is to seek community with someone else. And so if we can start to say, these tools are great, but part A is, I want to turn to you and say, brother, how you doing? Are you okay? Because 1 and 2 of us means one or both of you and I are struggling with loneliness or isolation. And by the way, it's not like I'm going to struggle the rest of my life and you're cool. Like, we're both going to struggle. And if we were able to say these tools have to be used first to take care of the planet and people, then innovation is going to be defined as how to make that happen for 8 billion people for generations to come. On a personal level, I don't speak for my employer in this regard. Most days I wake up, I'm really pessimistic. It's tough. I work in AI. I've worked in AI for about 12 or 13 years, and I wake up every day, as we all do in the States at least, and Western media reminds us, AI just beat humans at this. And I'm a musician. I played harmonica on the panel to make a point. One can listen to blues music and hear, Charlie Musselwhite, Sonny Boy Williams, and some of the best harmonica players in the world. My son's a musician, Nathaniel Phillip Music, he's brilliant, and he uses AI to make music. It's not up to me to say to you what you like better. I learned that years ago as a writer. If one likes a piece of writing and it touches their heart, and then they find out, oh, it was written by AI, if they feel tricked, that's up to them, but it still moved them. And so I bring that, but I played harmonica to demonstrate the joy of writing or learning an instrument, because I've written 10 books. It's like the craft of learning is something that like you just can't, and I don't think that people creating large language models would want to say this, by the way, but like one can't learn an instrument in like 20 minutes unless we get to like the matrix point where like the Neuralink thing, you can change it. And even then, I would say I have to see it happening. So I'm starting with the pessimism. Mainly, though, the thing that's I'm most pessimistic is the monetary systems. And I mentioned GDP a lot. GDP is a construct. It's an ideology. And if you look at neoliberal economics, there's a wonderful book called Donut Economics by Kate Raworth. The first chapter of that book should be a must-read for anyone in the AI world. Must read. And if you're saying, well, why? If it's economics. Well, because people use money to pay for anything that gets made in technology. And the first chapter, she eviscerates beautifully classic neo-economics. By the way, most economists like to eviscerate it. It's this idea of a man in an island. Man. Always a man. Not a woman, not an indigenous person, not a trans person. It's a man in an island. And this idea of scarcity. And tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
Tyler.
So Tyler, if you and I were on an island, at some point, I'm going to kick your butt because I need that mango and I'm going to kill you. But maybe we could also cut it in half and share it, because I'm more interested in how in partnership we could move forward versus competition. So cut to the end of the Second World War, and all these places had been destroyed. GDP was created to sort of help very quickly bring growth. But I've been to New Hampshire, where the actual place, Bretton Woods, where they made the GDP construct. You look at photos on the wall. I was eating a burger in the bar in the hotel where they, and it's all white people, it's all men, a couple of Japanese folks, which was fine that it was Japanese. But the point is the nature of how the statistical models that drive all of money today, they are still based on the predication of GDP, which does not measure caregiving, which means it doesn't really measure women in general in the world who are the primary caregivers in families. It doesn't measure the planet. So classic example, an oil tanker crashes into an island. The GDP goes up because jobs happen and for the next year. But then the measure of that ecological damage for 10 years goes away. So a lot of what I'm trying to do that I'm now going to shift to what I'm excited about is this clarion call to saying if we're going to measure things, we got to measure everything. And if there are people who want to keep saying like, well, those are squishy metrics. I lived in squishy metrics all my life. I was an actor. I wanted to be a minister. I'm a writer. It's not fair for someone to use pejorative terms about the nature of how certain aspects of our humanity function. And this separation of church and state, people understand that. One thing I love breaking the boundaries of is business and who we are. And artificial intelligence, like I just mentioned on this panel, walking into the room and being like, intellect, here's how we can build this, efficiency, this is why computers are better than people. And one thing, let's just say this, in general, once computers can do the job of a person, they do take jobs. Sorry, like efficiencies happen, and efficiencies mean if I can pay for a system that's a lot cheaper than a person, does it mean the companies want to? No. Does it mean that they have to if their primary metrics of success are exponential growth to shareholders? It's a legal thing. So what I'm trying to say in a lot of my work is to say, hold on. If equity is actually a thing, equity, right, and justice, then that means tools that mainly primarily a tiny group of people don't make sense. And also the thing about jobs, part of the reason I played harmonica just now is to demonstrate, well, what if a machine can take my job of playing harmonica? The joy of learning the harmonica, the joy of playing is something I want to do the rest of my life. And someone else is going to come in and be like, hey, we just did something that's better than you. That message of this is better than you humans, this is better than you humans, it is an ideology. It's a faith-based belief. This is something that always cracks me up. I've been talking about this for years. If I want to mention the word Jesus on this interview, or Allah, or if someone wants to mention, insert atheist term here, Buddhism here, and then someone's like, oh, you're supposed to be talking about AI and kind of keep it to business. No, because I've been around people for 10 years who say AI is real, it's sentient. That is called an ideology. That's a belief. And someone can have it, like Shinto traditions in Japan and animism. If someone wants to have a faith that machines will become real, call it what it is. Something you want, you yearn for. But to say, well, we can say this is scientific because it's going to happen, that is called informed speculation. That's what it is. And so just to wrap this up, I think why I'm most optimistic is we have 10 or 20 years kind of as a species to sort of wake up, and in indigenous cultures they call this the Great Awakening. And it's going to be really hard in one sense, not terrifying in the sense of like, oh, robots are killing us. This like shock of like, wait a second, how does the world look different if you believe you have worth, no matter what? How does the world look different if speed and efficiency and productivity, as important as they are, the first question is, hey Tyler, do you know you have a place in this world? And you start from that self-actualized place, and then now you're equipped to do what first? What do I think you have to do? I have to do is find that other person 1 and 2 and say, are you okay? Because really, I have 2 kids. Most people under the age of like 20, you talk to them, they're not like, I can't wait for the future of AI. They're like, I don't think I'm going to have a job. I can't afford college. A lot of these things about like use all these beautiful tools and you can go sit on a beach because AI will be doing whatever. I was a professional actor for 15 years. The second I ended one job, I was out of work. Once you're out of work, your whole perspective becomes very different. And I'm still a white guy. I'm like the most privileged person in the world. Anyway, the exciting opportunity for joy comes in this discovery of, I think I know I have worth. And that meaning one has that sense of joy and discovery. And as much as these tools are beautiful and glorious, they cannot supplant the work that has to be done in yourself first. And then by communing with others and trying to care for others, whether you call it virtue ethics or the golden rule, it's mirrored in multiple ideologies around the world. That work, that sacred work, also is going to connect us to nature. And it's not going to be like, let's go recycle. It's this like, wow, if the planet is a living entity and she needs my help, in the same way if you, Tyler, fell on the street, I'd go and pick you up, say, are you okay? There's this beautiful opportunity for a once in an epoch need. And why I get most excited is it's pretty binary. If the monetary and societal systems don't change, we have 20, 30, 40 years left as a species, period. If we opt to really, really say, including companies, including the richest people in the world, I want your kids to be okay, well then systems have to change, and we'll do it together.